Hey everybody, I'm traveling up the coast now. I'm on the way to Yamba, and one thing I've really noticed that's super common when I'm doing these workshops right now is that people, they feel reluctant to talk about tension of springs or levels of intensity with words like beginner, intermediate, or advanced, because they feel that giving it a certain name like that would have some kind of implication that someone's better than someone else, or someone's weaker, or someone's stronger, and for some reason that being at a different level is a good or a bad thing. There's some kind of emotional attachment to springs, that people feel like they can't change someone's spring because of the way it might make them feel. So there's a lot of people out there at the moment that are struggling with that concept of how do they come to terms what is the most important thing. So to take a step back, I want you to think of the last time you went to the gym and you looked around at everyone in the gym, and you would see that even if people were doing the same exercise, the people in the gym would be using different weight. So in that space, it is super common and normal that everyone is using the amount of weight that they need to get the results they're going for. We are all different. And what is our challenge will change over time, because as we get stronger, the weight we will use will change. So what's more important is that our needs are being met and we're being challenged at the right level of intensity, that we're scaling up over time, progressively overloading. So it's not really important what the person next to us is doing, it's more important what we're doing as compared to what we were doing last week. So when it comes to adjusting people's springs to making sure that they're working at their optimal level, it's just a matter of intensity. And when people talk about a beginner, intermediate, and advanced option in relation to spring tension, it's just the easiest and most descriptive way for someone who's unfamiliar with an exercise to make an assessment on what would be the best for them. It's exactly the same as if you go to Nandos and you look at the spice rating, and then you can make a judgment in advance what you think you would prefer. It's the same idea. It's just an indication of intensity. It doesn't have an inherent emotional value that makes something better than another. It's just an indication of intensity. And the reason that is because every exercise has a direction of progress. So with a reformer, it can only get heavier to be harder, or it can go the other direction and you can take away the support, which would also make it harder. So the real challenge then is either load in the spring tension, or it's gravity and being exposed to more of your own body weight with less support. And then the leveled system of a beginner, intermediate, advanced is just an indication of intensity for the exercise. You'd be saying that the load, if it was a heavy exercise, the heavier it gets, the harder it gets. That would be more advanced because it would be heavier. So it's just a logical, easy way for people to assess what the intensity would be. Now, because everybody is different, has a different body mass, and the differences between men and women, particularly with men having about 30% more upper body strength and more mass on average, it's going to change how a spring will affect that person. If someone has more mass, that spring might not be working the same muscle group as someone who weighs less. So if you look at the reformer, what determines the muscle group you're focusing on is actually the spring tension. and it's the spring tension in relation to their body mass. That will determine what the focus is. So if you're doing a standing split on the reformer, for the majority of people, a medium spring tension is just enough support. It's like a neutral spring, just enough support where it's not a challenge to move the carriage out, but it does help you come back. And then as you decrease the spring tension, you increase the challenge for the inner thighs. And then for the majority of people, the heavy spring, the full spring, is enough now to be a challenge to move the carriage out for the outer thighs or the glutes. So the effort is now to move it, to push it. So you see there that the tension is the determining factor of what the focus is. And when I say focus, the tension is the determining factor of which muscle group is working. And then you scale it in either direction. Either higher, more load, is more effort for the glutes, or less support is harder for the inner thighs. So there's a direction and there's a purpose. So if someone weighs more, then they're going to need more tension to push, and they're going to need more tension to give them support. So I want you to think about it like this. Imagine if you had two people that weighed 50 kilos and they were both on a light spring. So the challenge was for their inner thighs. Now, if you give one person a 20 kilo backpack and ask them to do the exact same movement on the same spring tension, the person who's carrying a 20 kilo backpack is going to have a harder time bringing the carriage back, just because there's more mass now. Instead of weighing 50 kilos, they now weigh 70, and that is the challenge. So when it comes to the reformer, the good thing is the majority of people are going to fit within a certain range of body mass where the intended muscle group will be challenged. But just be mindful that if someone's substantially lighter or substantially heavier, the muscle group will either be going unchallenged or be challenged in an advanced level. So it's good to have an understanding of every exercise. What is the focus? What's the muscle group that's being targeted? What is the direction of intensity? Is it less support? Is it more tension? And just to move away from the feeling that everyone needs to be the same. We're not. Everybody is different. Just imagine if you're in a group class and everyone had dumbbells. Imagine if you had, at the end, a guy who was 6'3" who weighed 110 kilos, and then you went down if everyone was lined up, and at the other end you had someone who was 5'6" and weighed 39 kilos. Imagine if every single person was holding the same weight and doing bicep curls. Let's just say the weight is 7 kilos. Now the person at the end who's 6'3", a guy, that 7 kilos is not going to feel like anything. But the person at the end who weighs 39 kilos, 7 kilos in comparison to their body weight is a lot. So that's going to feel quite heavy for that person. So you can see then, there's no difference. Imagine if you had the same group of people in a reformer studio and you said, everyone, one red spring. So the people in the middle are probably going to have an experience which is similar, but the people on the end are going to have a far different experience. So the message here is, don't get too worried about the language. The language is just a way to indicate intensity, so it's easy to understand. It doesn't have some inherent value system which makes someone better or worse than anyone else. It's just an easy descriptive way to understand what to expect. It's like the next time you go into Nandos, just because you get the spicier option doesn't mean you're more or less than the person next to you. It just means that that's your preference. So don't be worried about saying beginner, intermediate, or advanced. It's just a word to describe intensity. And then whenever you're teaching, the objective is really to help people progress, to actually make them better than what they were last week. and progressively overload them. So understanding what the tension they need as an individual will be, and then scale that. And we are all different, so just embrace that and try to look into what tension the individual needs, and it becomes a lot more interesting and fulfilling to serve a purpose and to serve the needs of your clients, as opposed to worrying about the language. You know, it's more important that we're actually helping someone improve, as opposed to worrying about offending someone with what they associate with a word. What's important is if you can actually help an individual improve and give them an indication of intensity in advance, which is simple and easy. Just let everyone know that the reason we're here is to help people. That's the intention. And it doesn't really matter what word you use, as long as your intention is to help people, you cannot go wrong. So I hope that helps everyone, and feel free to DM me if you agree or disagree. I don't mind. I really feel strongly about it. To make it easier for instructors to communicate what we're doing, if we can simplify the language, it helps a lot. So I'll see you guys on the road and internationally soon. Thanks for listening.